My name is Chase McCormick, and I am terrible with money. Well, that's not true. I am really good at spending it. I'm a starving artist who no longer wanted to starve. I make paintings that nobody wants to look at, music that nobody wants to listen to, clothes that nobody wants to wear, and movies that nobody wants to produce. While I initially started working in finance to fund my creative endeavors, I quickly fell in love with my new role and company. I was selected to be the new social media and events coordinator at the most fun firm in finance. While I don't know much about finance, I've certainly developed an interest to start investing in my future. That's why I thought it would be exciting for me to sit down with financial experts at our company, because if they can teach it to me, they can teach it to you. Please remember that nothing we say here should be taken as personal advice. This conversation is for entertainment purposes only. If you have questions about your financial situation, please talk to a licensed financial advisor. Here's my real question is, why are people calling Indian Prime Minister Modi the, quote, tariff king?
I had never heard anyone say that. Is he the tariff king?
That's what someone said. I just wanted to check with you.
Who's someone?
Well, I read a lot of things on the internet.
I need to know the source.
Well, I think I heard it in a tariff podcast I listened to this morning. So
India has tariffs on places.
Prime Minister Modi, that's a real guy though, right?
He's the Prime Minister of India.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's not the tariff king.
I don't know.
Got trouble on my mind. That's the attitude that got my ass off the sidelines.
Alex told me, it's been a while since we podcasted, about 2 months since we recorded an episode. I wanted someone easy, I wanted to get back on here with Jimmy, maybe with Mia, talk about credit cards, talk about, get a couple soft pitches in before I have a big dog on the episode. Alex said no. Alex was like, I want you to go and get our biggest guest yet. And after Sean, that's pretty hard to do. After Nico, after Ruth, it's hard to even get someone to schedule some time with us. But we made it happen today. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for, our first managing partner on our newly titled Chasing Finance.
Love it.
Ayal Shmilovich, GK managing partner, fantasy football champion, LA native, and founding member of Gerber Kawasaki. Welcome to the podcast.
Quite the intro, man. A Future Money podcast.
That's
co-host.
the one thing I forgot.
Sorry.
Future Money podcast. And I'll be honest, we might have taken the last episode and we're just kind of dumbing it down today.
Yeah.
You may know Ayal probably. If you follow Gerber Kawasaki, you probably have seen his podcast, Future Money, with Hatem. Last week, they talked about tariffs. I got inspired. Hearing them talk, it usually makes me realize how little I know about a certain subject. And it brought me back to my days back in AP Econ, learning about tariffs. And I thought it'd be interesting to come on here and ask some simpler questions about, what's going on.
All right, let's do it.
As Alex said at dinner last night, it's going to be tariffs for dummies. So we'll break it down today.
Let's do it.
But we'll get into all that later. Technically, we've got some, housekeeping to do. We got to reestablish my net worth. How many months has it been, Alex?
From this podcast?
Yeah, since we recorded one. Last one was Ruth.
Since we recorded about 2 months.
2 months?
But I think you should fill in what I don't know how much you know about this podcast and what he's been talking about.
I'll be honest. Have you watched an episode yet?
I watched the clips on Instagram.
Okay.
Does that count?
That's it. That's what most people say.
Yeah. Isn't that the world today in general?
I think so.
So I see your stuff on Instagram. It's a lot of Mia slapping her own head, I think.
Yeah.
And this is what I see a lot of.
So I often encourage him to fill in his guests as far as the journey he's been on. Because part of this whole process is just him becoming financially literate through interviewing advisors, which is an amazing place for him to be.
Yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen you. I saw a clip with Nico, where you guys talk about trusts and wills and exciting stuff like estate planning.
It's great.
Again, I saw Sean's. I saw clips of Mia. So I get where you're at. So let's talk about your net worth. All
right, let's do it. Well, we recalculated it and.
Where'd you start?
Okay. Episode 1, we calculated my net worth was $56.
It's positive.
So It's not, yeah, I mean, that's more than some people can say.
If it makes you feel better, when I graduated and started this job, I was at a negative 60,000 net worth. Does that make you feel better? There you go.
That makes me feel way better.
Okay, cool.
And now you're probably worth more than that, right?
Slightly, yeah.
Okay.
I have a positive net worth now, thankfully.
I'm what you call a growth story, you know? It's only up and up. And now, how long have we been doing the podcast? 4 months? 5 months? This is our 11th episode, right?
Yeah.
So following last Friday, I was sitting here in this office and I was like, I heard the news. They said the match came in. And I said, what's that again? And they said, remember 3%? And so I checked my Roth, I think it's called. It was
your 401k.
But do you have a Roth 401k?
Oh, but my Roth is still more. Right?
All right, let's be clear here real quick.
Okay.
You can have a Roth 401k and you can have a traditional 401k.
That's what I have.
He has both.
I have two Roths.
He refers to his Roth IRA and his Roth 401k as both of his Roth.
Right. Yeah, my Roth and my other Roth.
So your match will be non-Roth, just so we're clear. Your match will be traditional. Okay. The match is always a traditional.
I just wrote down 6,000 matched 401k. So technically, is that right?
Awesome. Yeah, I think you have 6,000 in your 401k too.
Okay.
What's the point?
The point is, guys, I'm rich now. And we've seen me not be rich. We've seen me go broke multiple times. But the good news is I'm here to report to the viewers that I'm now rich and I'm never going back.
I love it. Rich is in the eye of the beholder.
What's the net worth?
$25,000. 25K up.
That's amazing.
What 25K up.
What percentage increase is that from $56? We should do the math.
Percentage increase. All right. That's times
no, you're not gonna do it. You're not gonna do it in your head. Just
okay.
Yeah.
He's actually pretty good at mental math.
Okay, go ahead. I want to see it now.
Okay, so 25,000, 65 times 1 point. Okay, wait.
I'm pretty good at mental math too.
Let's just talk about what the equation would be. So 65,000.
Let's just do 50. 50
would be 56 times X. So 56 times X equals 25,000. So then you'd divide 25,000 by.
I'm sorry for this, everyone.
25,000 divided by 56 is how you'd get it, right?
That's correct.
So
now,
then
can you do 25,000 divided by 56?
Can we call it 50?
That's what I literally just said.
Yeah, you did say that. Okay, how many times does 50 go into 25,000? Well, 50 goes into 5,000 100 times, and so you'd times that by 5, so it'd be 500 times.
Right, so slightly less than 500x.
Pretty good.
447.
It's not bad, Alex.
Thank you.
447?
Yeah, sure.
That's what I was going to say. That was my second guess, so that's actually perfect. And Mia's going to be proud, too. I mean, that's kind of why we're doing this. Is make Mia proud. So
what are the chances that you would have had a $25,000 net worth if you didn't work here?
0%. And that's the thing you have to realize.
Oh, 1%.
God put these people in my life. So, and now I'm not supposed to talk about it, but so $5,000 of my net worth is because
I'm not supposed to talk about it.
That's my biggest accomplishment.
You should not talk about it.
Well, they bleep it out. Don't worry.
He talks about it. We bleep it out every time.
We bleep it out every time, baby. What else? I've got $6,000 in the bank too. That's pretty damn good.
Ballin'.
So that's
and he even bought me coffee.
Bought him coffee today
with his newly found wealth.
New wealth.
I appreciate that.
Anything for you. And then also my match. So I was at $3,000, and then Ross and Danilo matched me up. Now I'm at $6,000. Free money, right?
That's awesome. I love it. That's why you contribute in a 401k.
Yeah. Shout out to Mia. Shout out to Alex. Shout out to everyone at the company because they're keeping me straight. You know, people come on this podcast, they scare me straight. They tell me your future's doomed if you don't listen to your advisor. So here I am.
All right.
Throwing money around. So
love it.
All right, so I say maybe we warm up a little bit. I'll try to name a couple holidays that we've missed. Maybe you give me a slight recap of what comes to mind. Okay, so we'll start with Christmas.
What comes to mind when you say Christmas?
Yeah, I'll say new suit. You know, boom.
Oh, I would say I'm Jewish, so no, I'm just kidding.
That was my next one.
Christmas is where people spend all their money. This is where net worths go down usually.
Yeah, that's true. And I honestly, last Christmas I went pretty big because I was like had a big boy job. I bought a lot of people a lot of nice stuff, and then I was gonna go into debt, and then I got my bonus in January, and so then my bonus went straight to my credit card. This year I was cheaper. And then I actually got to save my bonus.
There you go.
And that's why I've got $6,000 partially.
Learning, man.
So that was a big moment.
I'm glad you said that because you said I was about to go into debt for Christmas, and that's just should never be a consideration.
People probably do, I would guess, right?
Absolutely, people do, and that's why I said the first thing that came to mind at Christmas, other than me being Jewish, which was people spending all their money.
Can't do it.
Nope.
Well, that leads me to my next point. My next one was Hanukkah.
Same idea. I mean, in the U.S., Hanukkah has become the Christmas analogy, and frankly, I'm not religious, and my kid his mom is Christian, and I'm Jewish, and we celebrate both.
So he went pretty big this year, huh?
Christmaka, baby. That's what we call it.
Yeah, Christmaka. That's good.
So it's not that different. We buy presents. It's not as big as Christmas in general.
I actually did some candle lightings this year.
Yeah, they're fun. Hanukkah's a fun holiday.
Yeah. It's like I think my second year, third year in a row celebrating Hanukkah.
It's one of our like two fun ones.
Yeah. What's the other one?
One that most people don't know. Yeah, Rosh Hashanah is fun, but Purim is one that most people don't know. It's kind of like our version of Halloween.
Really?
Yeah. People get dressed up, and actually is written that you're supposed to get so drunk during Purim.
Oh.
That it's from the book of Esther. So they say you're not supposed to be able to tell Esther from Ruth, which are two random people in the Torah. And that's how drunk you're supposed to be. The whole point of this is not to be religious, to say that you're supposed to get really drunk.
Esther's a good story, too, right? Mordecai's in there.
Well, yeah.
That's,
again,
I'm just saying, I've got a lot of Jewish friends. You'd think they would have invited me to this holiday of all.
It's not one of the big ones, but it's definitely one of the fun ones.
What's the one where I was celebrating, where I was drinking the grape drink? And
drinking the grape. That's got to be.
It's like a Jewish drink.
You mean wine?
I was like, what's the grape drink? Is that wine?
It was like a version of wine that was like more grapey.
That's just kosher wine.
What could be more grapey than wine?
Yeah, grape juice.
Well,
grapes themselves.
Let's just say I had a lot of it.
All right. Anyway.
All right. Next thing, New Year's. So, what did I do for New Year's? New Year's kiss, didn't speak English, so that was pretty cool. She's from Japan, so I was proud about that. And I actually did I light a candle on New Year's? Was that still Hanukkah?
Yes, actually, this year was like the latest in my lifetime Hanukkah has ever been.
So I did light a candle. I remember that. With my good friends, the Furlins. Shout out Debbie, Mark, Alana, Jackson, Ari. What else? LA fires. We're gonna cover that next week, but prayers to the people. Devastating what's been going on in LA. Ayal was actually the one that told me to evacuate, so that was good. Remember that call?
I do.
Yeah.
I do remember.
I didn't know how legitimate it was till I called Ayal, and I was like, hey, my neighbors are evacuating. Like, what's going on? Because he lives in my neighborhood. And then he's like, yeah, I'm at a hotel room right now. You need to go figure some out. So that was an important day.
Yeah, that was a big one.
What about the holiday party?
I wasn't there.
I wasn't there.
I got sick.
You were there, and Alex wasn't there.
I had norovirus.
So did I.
Oh, damn.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was in Mexico as well, just not with all you guys.
So apparently, like, if you go to Mexico, there's a 50% chance that you're going to get norovirus.
Yeah.
I've never been.
It's there's a big outbreak from there, and several of us got sick, and I got the most sick. But so yeah, I missed the holiday party, unfortunately.
Damn. Well, Kyle got a promotion.
He sure did.
And I don't know if you can see the award up there, but TPOY 2024.
Nice.
You deserve that one, Chase.
Love it. You know who got the first ever team player award? This guy.
Really?
Yeah.
Yo, that's sweet. What was it like the day when you got, like, okay, so you're a founding partner, or you're co-founder.
Founding member. I was just an advisor at the time.
Okay.
Just starting, really. Like, I started with this company, well, the previous company, like, in Santa Monica, like 2 months before.
Really?
Gerber Kawasaki became a thing.
Okay. Because, it was funny because when we did some of the videos, you were like very humble and like very honest. We were talking about like the early days. You were like, I don't know what Ross and Danilo saw in me, but they saw something. And now you're, one of the biggest assets to the company.
I tell the new advisors I train all the time, nobody was worse at this job when I started than me. So you don't have an excuse.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what else should we do? I was going to rant about being rich and not wanting a girlfriend for Valentine's Day. We might have to skip that, though. I'll just say this. The more money I save, the less I want to spend it. You know what I mean?
It is an interesting thing that happens that, because I come from a family of spenders.
Same.
And, when you're a spender, you love spending feels great because you get to get all the stuff. And when you start saving and more so investing, and you start to see the growth like hit and compound, you almost kind of get like addicted to it.
Yeah.
You're like, I want to put more in because that's going to grow even more.
That match did things for me.
It changes your sort of dynamic when you really see the outcome.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell people all the time. I go, you get used to saving, you get used to doing it. That's the big reason you save monthly. Is because it's just automatic. And once you see it work, you're like, damn, I need to do more of this.
Yeah. Nico had a great line on our last episode where he said, it's about saving money so you can spend it later. Because sometimes for me, it's like hard. I'm like, is this money real? It just like disappears in my 401k. Oh, I'll touch it when I'm 60. But he's always, it's like, thinking about like, oh, it's not like you can't spend it later. Like you always have it to spend. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. You're building wealth.
Yep.
You want to be wealthy? The only way to build wealth is to save and invest your money.
I mean, one thing is left to say. 25K.
So I don't know what's on these bills. Oh, it's just a green.
I don't know where these came from, but we just found them.
Yeah.
Someone was printing money.
I'm glad you're only throwing $1 bills around and not like hundreds.
That's all I know at this point. All right. Oh, I read the newspaper. I was going to talk about that.
Like just one?
Yeah, I was watching Mia's dog this weekend. She gets the Wall Street Journal. Okay. So I started reading it at the dog park. Kind of confusing, though. It's like you read it and then it's like, oh, on page 16, finish the story.
You've never read a newspaper, and then an actual newspaper.
I guess I've never opened it up. Like, I feel like my dad would be like, he'd read it first and he'd be like, oh, read this.
Got it.
But like all of a sudden I'm like trying to turn to page 16 and like 6 different things fall out.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, is this a puzzle or a newspaper?
Yeah, I obviously have read many newspapers in my life, but I'm much more of a fan of the digital versions.
Yeah.
I
gotta subscribe
I'm new
to that.
School, old school and new school.
Yeah. I mean, you're a pretty tech savvy guy.
I try.
What's up with the Orion glasses? Do you have those?
What's an Orion glasses?
What are those called? The Google?
Is that the Meta?
The Meta ones? Yeah.
The Meta Ray-Bans? I mean,
do you have them? Are they good?
I don't have them.
Okay.
No, I don't have any desire to have those glasses.
It is kind of weird. I feel like the Vision Pros kind of fell off. Like, I remember we all kind of thought that, like, in very near future, we'd all be using them every day. And it's, like, weird.
There's been so many false starts on VR.
Yeah.
Whatever they want to call it. Spatial computing. I think there's... it's a gigantic thing that you have to have on your head that costs $4,000. So, it is a very unique, specialized thing.
I'd rather buy some buffs personally, get some Cartiers.
I think that's very different than Apple Vision Pro. Those are two different segments.
I know, but I feel like the swag hits the same,
I don't think there's any swag to the Vision Pros.
It's just like
get it for functionality.
You got 4 racks on your face, you know what I mean? It's like
a gigantic thing on your head.
Same feeling I got in this new suit. I'm like, damn, I got with the suit, with the watch, with the shoes. Like I've got over $1,000 on my body right now.
Yeah.
Throw my Carhartt backpack on there.
That's an investment in yourself and your success. It's different.
I think this is going to be our biggest podcast yet. Is it because I have the new suit? Is it because I have a managing partner on? Who's to say, really?
It could be anything.
It could be anything.
Probably the suit.
Well,
it's not the new backpack.
People don't like the new Carhartt backpack.
What kind of backpack did you get?
I told he was trying to ask me what kind of backpack he should get, and I said get something that looks like if you're wearing a suit, you can carry this thing or have this backpack on. It looks nice, like a businessman would have.
Okay.
I didn't want to do it.
He took that advice and went with a camo Carhartt backpack.
It's sweet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, but I got a good deal on it, and I really wanted it. And you have to realize I'm going to be riding the bus to work every day. So I gotta, look. If I'm walking around with a briefcase, people are gonna like think I'm a mark. You know what I mean? Get a little Carhartt, a little camo. They're gonna know that not to with me. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of. I like having something a little tougher.
All right, I understand that.
Also, do you think like as they're saying I might be the new head of security at GK? Do you think like what weapon is it like okay for me to be able to carry? Mind you, I will be on the bus.
Yeah. Isn't this supposed to be about tariffs?
Yeah, it is.
Oh yeah, I
didn't know at what point this actually needs to shift to real stuff.
Believe it or not, it's going to probably shift sooner than it ever has.
Yeah.
All right, neighbors. Okay, we can go about that. LA native. Where in LA did you grow up?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley.
Okay.
The people who grew up in our era will know the Valley. We call it the Valley.
Yeah.
Because it's been in movies. If you're watching Cobra Kai,
I actually watched all of it.
Yeah, so
I haven't seen the new season.
Keep talking about the Valley. That's our Valley. Now I grew up in Sherman Oaks, which is a different part than where they're in. But yeah,
it's funny that you say that because I feel like the original Karate Kid is like such a like Valley movie.
100%. I mean, movies in the 80s, like the Valley for some reason.
I was going to say Valley Girl too, with
Valley
that Nick Cage. And...
like, there's a ton of movies from the 80s that focus on the Valley. Like,
yeah.
We used to have the Galleria. They used to call it the Galleria.
Mm-hmm.
There's still technically a Sherman Oaks Galleria, but it's not what it was back then. But it was like the famous mall. Like that's where, for some reason, the 80s caught this thing and it like became huge.
Is that the one like when you're on the 405, right when you cross over?
Yes,
that's the Galleria.
The 101 405 interchange there.
Okay,
but it used to be like a real indoor mall, like a big indoor mall. And for some reason became.
I've still never been to the
Beverly Center.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, do you really need to go?
Is
to
it worth
mall?
going? I don't know.
I mean, malls or whatever.
Yeah, the Grove's. I feel like the Grove is cool.
It's cool because you just get to like walk around outdoors, and that's really it. That's
farmers market. It's
outdoor malls are generally have become much more popular because experientially they're more fun, and you can have them in LA because it's sunny 300 days out of the year.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll skip the Florida man aspect, but you are a fellow Florida man. Psychology. I was going to ask real quick, can you diagnose me?
Yes. No.
No. Okay. No one can.
I'm not licensed.
Okay. Let's talk about tariffs now.
Yep.
I thought, so I've got kind of like, I mapped it out. Maybe I'll tell you what I know about tariffs.
Okay.
And then we could get into some like easier questions and then kind of like some deeper questions.
Okay.
Does that work?
Good deal.
All right. So I've done some pretty good research. And so I found out that tariffs are taxes on imported goods.
Good job.
Correct?
Very good. Just one search of what is a tariff.
And Trump is doing some things. We'll get into that. But there's like, kind of why we're here, right? Is because it's a kind of a major headline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's what he's talking about almost all the time.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's what I thought. And so someone said that they're the oldest taxes. Is that true?
The oldest? I don't think that's true because the oldest taxes are probably like from
income
Egyptian
taxes,
times.
Yeah. And
I would say the oldest tax is tribute that countries would pay other countries after they conquered them is probably the oldest.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
But we digress.
Okay. So the Revolutionary War was about us paying taxes to Britain, but that's not really a tariff, right? Because we weren't an established country.
It's not a tariff because they were just taxing us on random stuff like tax the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act and the Tea Act.
Yeah.
And ultimately there was just a way for them to generate revenue off of us. So it wasn't a tariff. It was just a general tax.
A general tax.
Yeah.
So then when we established America, 1776, people that might not know, what was like the first tax? Like the first tariff, I should say.
Ever?
Yeah.
I'm not well versed enough to know like the history of taxes and what the first
But do you think it was probably immediate? Like we were like, okay, now we're a country, let's start tariffing people.
I don't think we were financially trading much with the rest of the world yet at that time. We were just sort of getting our thing up and running.
Sure.
So I know that in the early 1800s, we started doing some tariffs and things like that as we were trying to sort of protect our emerging economy. But I'm not going to pretend to be a early American history expert.
Sure. Well, protectionism is using tariffs to protect local industry.
Correct.
So
yeah, that is.
I just wanted to share that.
I was like, are we just throwing out definitions of things?
Well, I wrote about 6 things that I knew. So okay. I also read something about the 1988 election, the free trade agreement. Was that a big deal?
As NAFTA, like the North American Free Trade Agreement?
I think so. I didn't write that, but
NAFTA was a big trade agreement that we had with the U.S. and Mexico.
Okay.
So it was the North American Free Trade Agreement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure of the year of establishment, 88 or
1988,
if that's the one. Which actually during Trump's first term, so it established free trade between the 3 countries essentially.
Okay.
In Trump's first term, he decided that it wasn't good enough and basically renamed it the U.S. Mexico-Canada agreement, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, so when you say free trade, that means there was no tariffs?
There weren't tariffs on most things. Yeah, most things. It was basically established a lot more free trade. And essentially, Trump didn't change much in NAFTA. Changed a couple things here and there, but essentially the USMCA is the same thing as NAFTA.
Okay. Yeah. And so has this worked? Has this been a good thing? Is it good that he changed it and is changing it again? Why? Like what? I guess let's go back to his first term. Why do you think he initially was like, this needs to change?
I think we need to go back a little bit before we talk about Trump tariffs. I think the understanding of why a country would put tariffs into place is, I think, important.
All right, we'll get there. Let's get a couple quick buzzwords.
You got to begin at the beginning.
You're right. So a couple buzzwords I know. GDP.
Yeah.
That's important, right?
What does it mean? What does it stand for?
Gross domestic production.
Product.
And so I remember from AP Econ.
Yeah.
That
was. Keep saying AP because he took AP.
People need to know.
Yeah, he took AP.
Wasn't one of those losers in the regular Econ.
We're sorry for everyone who took regular Econ.
No, we're not sorry. From AP Economics.
Yeah.
I took regular econ.
And it shows.
We're sorry. I'm sorry.
My second financial advisor took regular econ. We're okay. So GDP, is that like have to do with tariffs?
No. GDP, well, I mean, tariffs can affect it, but GDP is basically the entire production of your economy.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that goes in and out of your economy, but basically what we produce, if we aggregate everybody here today and everything we produce, consume, and all that kind of stuff, that's what GDP is.
Okay.
So it's production and consumption and everything.
So probably the higher your GDP, the higher your tariffs would be?
No,
maybe the lower.
Tariffs are a tax.
Okay.
And GDP is output. Tariffs can affect how production happens.
Sure.
But they're not directly related.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what about foreign policy?
What about it? That's a broad statement.
A couple buzzwords I just like.
That's a broad statement.
I've been doing some research, listening to some podcasts, so like I was just a couple things I just wanted to check how directly like a foreign policy would be related to tariffs. Is that
foreign policy is a general statement about how we deal with other countries. That could be militarily, that could be trade-wise, that could be, universal taxes.
Okay.
It could be anything. So
it could be tariffs, but
it could be
probably not.
Yeah.
But today it could be.
Generally, when you hear the terms foreign policy, it's generally our diplomatic and or military relationships with other countries. That's when you hear the word, doesn't mean that that's what it means. When you hear it on CNN or whatever, you generally hear how is the U.S., dealing with
relating
with other countries on a diplomatic or military function.
And so war is probably more important to be talked about than, let's say, the tax on sugar.
Yeah, in general, yeah.
Generally speaking. Yeah. Okay. And then also my final just like buzzword is trade deadline. So that's been used a lot. Is there a trade deadline like for country to country? Is there like a time of the year where a trade deadline ends and there's,
we don't. Well, a trade deadline, I'm assuming, it's not a term you hear day to day, but I'm assuming it's something to do with like when the deadlines for these tariffs to go in are.
Okay.
Because it's not something that like a trade deadline could be anything.
Yeah.
But
I just meant like, because obviously I've heard it in the NBA, so I was just thinking like,
I literally just searched trade deadline and all the links that come up are NBA links.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to apply.
Because that's probably the trade deadline's coming up, or maybe just passed.
Yeah. So that's what was kind of made me think.
I think if you hear about it, it's probably related to when the deadline or when tariffs go in. But again, not a readily used term in my experience.
More of an NBA thing.
More of an NBA thing. Could be the NFL, anything.
That's true.
Any sport.
But there is... Okay, so there's not really a clock on a tariff. Like, when would they change? Like, so... Like, I guess we'll talk about that later, but like Trump wants to enact a new tariff. He can just kind of do it and just say, okay, your taxes are now this. And that's kind of...
Yeah, it's interesting. Traditionally, tariffs have been more of a legislative thing. So Congress, an enactment of Congress. Trump is wielding a lot of power from the executive side that is not traditionally done.
Yeah.
But yes, if he deems it necessary, he can create an executive order for tariffs.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And it remains to be seen what they are and when they are and how they go in and how much they're going to be, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, cool. Let's deep dive. All right. I think I understand what they are now. So now my question is, some politicians would want low tariffs. Some would want high tariffs. What's kind of like the pros and cons of each?
Yeah. So again, you're taxing stuff on an import that you have in. So on a theoretical side, when you're putting a tariff in place, you're protecting American business, right? You're saying, okay,
protectionism,
right? We're sending too much money to China for making iPhones. I don't know, whatever the case may be. So let's throw a tariff on aluminum and steel so that it's more expensive, to make it there. And therefore, it creates an incentive to make it here.
Yeah.
That's the theoretical idea of why you would impose a tariff, is to protect business here.
Okay.
In reality, the world is not an A-B. It doesn't work that way. There's no one variable equations. A million things can get affected by imposing a tariff on another country.
Interesting.
That could be overall foreign relations with that country. That could be creating a full-blown trade war where you get retaliatory tariffs.
Yeah.
That could be the country basically, like in other countries that we send money to, can devalue their own currency, in which case we could still buy more of it.
Yeah.
Because we're able to buy more. So that may or may not protect our business.
Okay. So what would be another pro besides protecting business?
It gives the government tax revenue.
And also tax revenue. Yeah. That would make sense.
Those are the two major, again, theoretical pros on them. Rarely in our modern industrial world, post-industrial world, I should say, have tariffs sort of been a good overall use for tax revenue, because it's a very small dollar amount compared to the rest of the taxes we collect.
Yeah.
And it does create all kinds of byproducts, because when you put them in, a lot of other things can happen.
Sure.
Yeah. So it remains to be seen.
Okay. And what would the cons be then?
The cons can be a lot of things. On a very
international relations,
the consumer paying a higher price, right? Because if I'll use the iPhone example again.
Yeah.
Let's assume that we started building iPhones here, right? Well, if we build iPhones here, or if we even just forget that, let's just say we're still building them in China, and there's a 25% tariff. Do you think Apple is going to eat that cost?
Yeah.
Most likely not. Now, they can mess with some things and try to, change their supply chain.
But we're going to just end up paying more.
But you're going to end up eating the cost, most likely. So it's it tends to be inflationary.
Yeah.
And costs go up. And we're a consumer-based economy. We're not an industrial powerhouse anymore. We are a consumer-based digital economy.
Yeah.
So 70% of our GDP, to go back to your GDP
gross domestic product,
is consumption. We buy and consume things from other places.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes that's here and sometimes that's abroad. We're probably not going to change that dynamic. We're probably not going to build a million cars here, millions more cars here anymore because of the cost.
And that's exactly where my head was, because obviously from Detroit, I think about the auto industry. So I think when we talked about protectionism, I would be in the camp that we should, have higher tariffs on cars in order to protect American car industry, right? So if we want to save jobs in Detroit,
sure,
which it's a little late for that compared to what it once was, but hypothetically speaking, maybe decades ago, once people wanted to take, production costs overseas, they could put higher tariffs on, foreign cars, and then more people
and that might
American.
That might have helped American car companies, but not necessarily the economy as a whole. And the perfect example of this is look at Europe, look at Germany, look at Italy, who, a lot of their chief exports are cars, right? They have tariffs on cars coming into their country.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that Europe's economy is booming because they're protecting their auto industry. Right? They're not a very they've barely grown over the last decade.
It's weird to think because aren't Italy's two major companies, Louis Vuitton and...
But Louis Vuitton's French.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking of France then.
Yeah.
Because,
And again, protectionism hasn't helped France, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Italy's car companies, right? Fiat is the big one. But, you have all
Mercedes, right?
That's German.
Oh.
So Germany is the big, is a huge car manufacturer, right? Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, like Porsche, they're all German companies. And while Germany is probably the best industrial power in Europe, the economies of Europe as a whole have not grown in the last decade, hardly at all. So protectionist nature doesn't really overall improve. Did it help save their jobs in auto industry? Probably.
Yeah.
But it didn't necessarily help them as a whole.
Why? So do you think that their inability to grow is from external factors?
There's a number of factors. And again, economics are so complicated. Like there's no one variable that can lead to another variable. Everything has 100 other forces acting upon it. So when you enact a tariff, you're sort of you're just throwing an uncertainty into things. I understand why you would do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you want to protect jobs. And it sounds good, especially when you're pandering to a voter base, and that could be a Democratic or a Republican base. You're saying, oh, we want to protect your jobs.
Yeah.
And that plays well with people.
Always,
and so people will like that because most people don't understand all the factors that go into economic output. So there could be a lot of things. So when going back to your cons question, it could increase the cost for people. It hurts foreign relations, and then on kind of the worst case scenarios, we get what's called a full blown trade war.
Tariff war. Trade war.
Trade war is very bad.
I wrote that down for later. So
there you go. You want to get into it?
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Well, no, I don't want to hear about it. Yeah.
So you just wrote down trade war, and you just
I've got a whole bunch of questions, but
go ahead, let's do it.
Well, I before we get into trade war, I was interested because this was one of my next questions you started to touch on. Politically speaking, right? It seems that tariffs don't necessarily have a political affiliation, like it doesn't seem Democrats want higher tariffs, Republicans want lower, or vice versa. It seems like it's more of an understanding of like the economy as a whole and like what will result from that.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say that they've been under recent history, and there haven't been many, but I think the last few have been under Republican presidents.
Okay.
But I don't think it's necessarily a party designation.
It's more of a means to an end. So you would say, I'm going to raise tariffs to protect your jobs.
Correct.
And then you could say, I'm going to lower tariffs so that the cost of living is lower and there's lower inflation.
That's exactly that.
Kind of what
Those are good ways to look at it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And how do people necessarily determine like a tariff rate? So obviously, how do government officials, like if they want to say, okay, I guess my question would be like, could you tax a different tariff on a different product? Or is it like country to country, they have this percentage for all of their products?
Yes and yes. I mean, there's no like formula for doing this. I think a lot of it is you'll just get a reciprocal tax. So, Europe taxes us 25% on cars. We're going to tax Europe 25% on cars, right? 10% on industries that are maybe, we're worried less about protecting or whatever. So there's no necessary like formula that would say we need to do X amount of tariffs.
Okay.
It's like, also our brains like round numbers and sort of like numbers like 25% or 10%. Like no one ever said we're going to do a 14% tax on something.
Really? Okay.
Like it's just our brains kind of think of these.
Because now that I'm thinking about it, exactly what you just said, like, does it even get anywhere? Okay, we're going to raise your tariffs to this, and then they just match you. Like,
so that's where you get, right, retaliatory tariffs, trade wars. Like, that's when things get really bad.
Okay.
And that's what we really don't want because, like any war, a trade war is the word is like the phrase is actually a good phrase because it's very much like a war. And I've used this example if we were talking about history. I use the example of World War I,
right,
where the entire world went to war because of an assassination of an archduke.
Yeah. Ferdinand
Austria,
or something?
Yeah, in Austria-Hungary. And all of a sudden, and then fast forward and France is fighting Germany and the US is fighting Germany.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? Because it's one little step that creates a retaliation, and then this person has diplomatic relations with that person, and so they're going to retaliate. And then, of course, you got to bring your guy in.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately how escalation sort of gets out of control, and it happens in regular wars, and it can definitely happen in trade wars.
So most of like wars that are fought are often due to relations through trade. Like that's kind of the number one binding thing between international countries. And then because we're trading with this country, then that's probably why we're going to go fight with them.
I think in general, I don't know if that's necessarily like that causes it, but I think in general, the countries that you have better trade relations with, you tend to have better diplomatic and foreign relations with. So yeah, they tend to be allies. We trade a lot with China, but we're clearly not in good terms with them,
true,
right?
Yeah.
So we have this sort of Cold War with China, and unlike our Cold War with Russia, before that, we didn't do a lot of trading with Russia, but we send a lot of money to China, but we kind of are not happy about it.
Yeah.
In the US.
What does China buy from us?
Digital stuff.
I guess
right?
Nvidia's American, right?
So yeah, but I mean they're restrictive on the number of chips they can buy.
Oh yeah. Right.
But in general, yeah, they don't. That's the whole point of this, and that's the rallying cry for tariff hawks is we send all this money to China, they spend it on their own economy for their benefit, and they don't really buy much from us, which is not necessarily true. They buy stuff from us. They buy Teslas, they buy iPhones, and even though they were produced in China, the bulk of the money, like they are U.S. companies.
Do they even, so all those iPhones, do they even come to America and then go back to China, or do they just buy direct from the manufacturer?
If you buy a Tesla in China, it's built in a Chinese factory.
Yeah.
It's not, there's no reason for it to come back.
But they still would have to pay the tariffs on that.
If the tariffs went into place, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So far, we're still unclear as to whether there's going to be tariffs or not. Words have been said, but no amounts have been.
So are we in a free trade with China right now? What do you mean by...
Nobody, Trump has basically said 100 different things about tariffs, and none of them have actually gone into effect yet, so to speak.
What are we doing here? Seriously?
We keep
the whole
changing.
Mexico-Canada thing? That's just...
Well, I'm glad you brought that one up, because the Mexico thing was in particularly funny, and Canada closely followed, but I think it was 2 weeks ago now when this when this tariff was supposed to go into place.
February 4th.
I woke up in the morning.
Sure.
To start working out. I watched CNBC in the morning, which is what I do. And the market was down because they were talking about how tariffs were going into effect starting tomorrow.
Right.
And then literally by the end of my workout, the market had rallied back to even because tariffs were delayed by 30 days because there was an agreement that the U.S. and Mexico were working on. So we just don't know.
So they put me in a panic for nothing. Is that what you're saying? I thought this whole Canada-Mexico trade war,
so that nothing
Gulf of America, what's that whole thing?
That's just propaganda, is what I say. Does it really matter? Somebody asked me this, is how bad is it that we renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America? And I go, everybody can name bodies of water whatever they want. I go, we call Germany,
yeah,
but they call it Deutschland.
Oh yeah,
right. So we can call it anything.
I forgot about that.
You can call it the Gulf of Cats. It doesn't matter.
Gulf of Chasing Finance.
There you go. You can call it that. Nobody. I mean, you'll be wrong for Google Maps, but You could say whatever you want.
It's weird because on some maps it says Gulf of Mexico, and then if you zoom in, it says Gulf of America now. I was like,
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't have any bearing on anything. Like, Mexico could still call it the Gulf of Mexico, and nobody has any say on that.
Here's my real question is, why are people calling Indian Prime Minister Modi the, quote, tariff king?
I never heard anyone say that.
Okay.
Is he the tariff king?
That's what someone said. I just wanted to check with you.
Someone?
Well, I read a lot of things on the internet.
I need to know the source.
Well,
is the source TikTok?
I don't have a link. I don't have a link.
I know TikTok is back on App Store, so is that the source?
I think I heard it in a tariff podcast I listened to this morning. So
India has tariffs on places.
Prime Minister Modi, that's a real guy though, right?
He's the Prime Minister of India.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he's not the tariff king.
I don't know.
According to you.
I didn't say that. I said I've never heard that.
All right. And what's like the most famous tariff, would you say?
Oh, we're going to do this? The Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act?
Is there one?
It's the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act is the most famous tariff, not because historically it was the most significant, although it was one of the more significant ones.
Okay.
Because of the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, Alex, you said I wrote down Hollywood tariff. Hawley-Smoot. Okay,
Holly,
yeah.
Which is Hawley.
Alex made a joke about that yesterday. What is the Hawley-Smoot tariff?
It wasn't a joke. I said Hawley-Smoot tariff. I said you should ask me about that.
I wrote Holly because that was I've got a list of different types of tariffs, and one of them in there was Holly.
Yeah. So the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act was enacted in the 1920s or early 30s. I think it was in the 20s. During the Great Depression. No, so it probably would had to have been in the 30s because that's when the Great Depression really hit. And generally speaking, the idea was to raise revenue to protect industry in the U.S. as we were in the Great Depression, and we didn't want to, import everything and hurt businesses here. Unfortunately, what it did is it created a full-blown trade war where all the other countries retaliated, or many of the other countries retaliated. It actually ended up hurting business more, and the U.S. actually went deeper into depression because of it. And now, was
negative outcome.
Once again, is there a direct correlation? There's a million other factors that were, there was no Federal Reserve, there was no SEC, there was no regulation.
Okay.
All the regulations we have or at least the big regulations we have in the financial industry came out of the Great Depression because the 1929 stock market crash, basically people would speculate and run rampant on, and there was no regulation in place. So, and then we created things like Social Security that would happen in the Great Depression. Like, we were sort of unfettered capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, where there were no guardrails, essentially.
I mean, I could have been the Federal Reserve for all they knew back then.
Right. So there was no Federal Reserve, and then they would increase interest rates in an environment where, so there's a million other factors, but the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act is known to have been bad, but really became famous because in the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off from the 80s, the teacher who is the super boring teacher, if you guys have seen it, talks about it and does the whole like.
Is that the beginning?
The Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act.
Yeah,
so that's what he's talking about.
Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act of 1930 something, and so it sort of like became famous because of that.
I thought it was from the dinner scene.
What dinner scene?
Am I mixing that up with the Blues Brothers?
There's definitely no dinner scene.
Don't they go to a fancy restaurant?
They go to a fancy restaurant for lunch.
That's in the Blues Brothers too.
But that's not it. That's not when they talk.
Didn't they call themselves the Van Smoots or something?
I actually never saw the Blues Brothers. If you
really,
yeah.
Oh, dude, that's like my favorite.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
All right, you should watch it with Micah.
Okay, deal.
It's one of those movies that no matter how many times I see it, I cry laughing, and it is like shit that's not even funny, but to me. All right, reciprocal tariffs.
We talked about that.
So that's like when you do a tariff and someone does it back?
Yeah, like
I'm learning.
I'm rubber, you're glue.
Okay, perfect. Blanket tariffs.
Just tax everything.
Tax everything the same amount.
Everything from that country. Whatever your goods come from Mexico, 25% on everything.
Okay. Hollywood, but it's really Hawley-Smoot. So that's a bad tariff. We don't use that anymore.
Those were the names of the two people that created that bill, Hawley and Smoot.
Yeah. And Hawley and Smoot definitely didn't take AP economics, guys. I'll tell you that much. Valorum tariff.
I don't know.
Valorum, no. Okay.
I don't know what that is.
And then it just says specific tariffs, which is probably just a specific tariff, I would guess.
You just like put random words.
So let's go deeper now. How can the effects trickle down? So tariffs, I wrote down how do tariffs affect U.S. jobs. So I'm going to say that we use them to protect U.S. jobs.
Theoretically.
And then I wrote GDP, which doesn't really have that much to do with it. And then I wrote et cetera. So really, it's international relations.
I mean, in theory, it can help jobs, in theory.
Yeah.
But like I said, there's many other variables that can affect
It's a government promise. It's what, you take what you get, but at face value, but you never exactly know with economics.
Right.
Okay, so we cut all tariffs to China. What happens next?
We cut, meaning we don't have tariffs?
Oh, wait, that doesn't make sense, does it?
Or we enact tariffs.
I know, that's what I'm thinking about. Let's go either way. So, we tax China 100%. What do they do next?
I mean,
hit us with a reciprocal tariff?
I'm not going to pretend to know what Xi Jinping in China is going to do, but
yeah, let's just have some fun.
Theoretically, they would probably retaliate with tariffs.
They tax us back.
Yeah.
100%. And then next thing we know, we're in a trade war.
Right. And the question is, does that spread? Does Europe get upset at us? Does Mexico get upset at us? And if we're in a full-blown trade war, that's very bad.
And when do trade wars become real wars?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a direct correlation, or at least not one I can think of in modern, in the last 100 years, that an actual war that was led from a trade war. So in general, you use a trade war in lieu of an actual war.
Do we have a little more power as a country because have so much wealth and we buy so much from other countries?
Yes, that is the card that, for lack of a better word, the Trump card here is, because we have a lot of economic power and we buy things from a lot of places. We have leverage. That's the point of all this.
The Trump card. I see what you did there.
Yeah,
okay.
Like damn. Yeah. If we didn't have this leverage, this economic power, we would be coming from a position of weakness, and everyone would be like, "Who cares? Tariff us." But yes, we spend a lot of money. We buy stuff from all over the world, so it does hurt other countries if we don't consume their products as much. Again, in a world where there was one variable and one outcome, this would hurt those countries significantly. Yeah. So they don't want tariffs. Because they don't want Americans buying less of their products.
Sure.
The government's China enacting tariffs is saying, see, they don't want us to put tariffs on them because we buy all their stuff. So they better play ball.
Yeah. Is there a thing where the more stuff we buy, the lower our tariffs will be? Do we have maybe lower tariffs compared to other countries just because we're big purchasers?
We generally have tariffs have not generally been part of our economy for many years, except during the Trump years, because we consume more than we produce. Again, 70% of our GDP is consumption of products. Yeah. So because we're a consumer-based economy, we tend to not have tariffs on our economy.
Sure.
But that's an argument for people who are protectionists, for people saying, well, why would we buy a European car when they tariff us, but we don't tariff them for buying our car?
Oh, so that's what you mean? So we weren't even slapping tariffs on other people? So that was the free trade agreement?
Yes. Well, that's crazy. Yeah. So that's the idea. And again, nothing happens in a vacuum and nothing is perfect. Free trade has gotten a lot of benefits.
Sure.
But it has also created some issues.
And you said that the margins are slim. There's not really an outcome where we're kind of coming out of our national debt because we start tariffing people. That's complete, not even a near margin.
It's not even close.
Okay. And how do we come out of our national debt?
That's a great question.
Do you have any ideas?
That's another 3-hour discussion.
Come on, you're the smartest guy I know. I know you've got a couple ideas.
There's not it literally is 90% of the stuff that we spend money on, unless we completely change. It's Social Security, Medicare, all the non-discretionary spending that the government does. We can't mess with that. So it's only
screwed
10 to 20% of the actual spending that we can do.
Yeah.
And we had a balanced budget literally once in the last 25 years.
We did?
Yeah. It was,
and I'm 24, dude.
It was in 99 or 2000.
Yeah, I was born in 2000, December,
sorry.
though. So
maybe it's a you thing.
And I'm a spender, guys. You know that. I mean, I got 6 thou, but
so one way is to increase the age of Social Security and Medicare. That would be a way to cut, to save some money. But
sure,
no politician wants to touch that.
Okay.
Because the voter base for Social Security is very high.
Yeah.
And it's a dangerous game for them to play.
Is it military spending?
We spend a ton of money on military.
Because it seems like we spend on military and then we just end up selling all of the stuff to then people that we usually end up fighting within the next decade.
Well, that's a different conversation. We spend a lot of money in the military for defense, but the companies sell military stuff to the other, which is actually good for us, right? That's
Tariffs,
actually an export, not tariffs. We just they buy our stuff, right? Yeah. So that's actually something that's good for us on an economic basis, not on a philosophical and moral basis.
We're not going to get into that,
right?
But I will say, nobody wants to with us. You know what I mean?
We spend more money on the military than the next 17 countries combined.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Can you explain the Social Security thing to me? Because I always hear people saying, "Oh, they're not going to have Social Security." Like when I'm almost 30, when I need Social Security or would be getting it, it's not going to be there anymore. And then I bring it up with like my parents; they would like refuse to understand any of this stuff.
Yeah,
and my dad's always like, "They've always said that. They said that to us, and we'll be able to get it."
He took regular economics,
so maybe Chase can explain it to you.
I understand. I just understand why like. I see it on my paycheck every 2 weeks, and they keep telling me that I'm maybe not going to have Social Security available to me. So, like, why would that happen?
So it's on my paycheck, too.
And will that actually happen?
Possibly. So you're paying into something right now that is being used by somebody else, a demographic that is much larger than your demographic currently. So the baby boomer generation is a very large generation who didn't save a lot of money and are basically bleeding Social Security dry. And the age at which we get Social Security is 62 to 67 to 70, depending on what you want to do.
I'm looking at you, Mom. That's you, girl.
So what happens is the income coming into Social Security is not enough to withstand all the money they're taking out until we get our shot.
So it's pretty much a population problem.
It's a population problem, and in theory can be fixed in one of two ways. Well, they keep raising the social, because there's a limit to how much income you can put into Social Security. So like I can't remember the number now because they increase it every year, but it's right now it's around 170,000, I want to say. Once you pass that number, you no longer pay into Social Security. So you pay your Social Security tax. And so you can increase that, right? You can keep increasing it or make it up to 300,000. That will increase the amount. In theory, the easier way to fix it is to raise the age at which you take it. Because when the Social Security Act was enacted in the 30s, retirement age was 62. And the average life expectancy was 67.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 5 years. That's easy math.
Sorry, Gam.
Right. That's easy math. You can pay for people for 5 years. Now we have longevity and a giant group of people taking money out. So you have a large group of people who retired, let's say at 66, and are living to 86 on average, 85, whatever the number is.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have 20 years from a very large group of people who are siphoning this money out of the system.
So basically, it's the same problem as like the housing thing. It's like the older people who refuse to sympathize with young people for having it a little bit harder nowadays are the same ones that are taking up all the Social Security money and living in all the houses and not dying, essentially.
Alex trying to throw older people under the bus.
And the sad thing is the only two fans of this podcast are my two grandmas. So settle down.
But it seems like it's essentially like a large, it's not that it's a problem, but it's a large like thing we're dealing with as...
Look, I'm not going to blame that generation because they were promised the same promises we were. That you're going to pay into a system and you're going to work for X amount of years and then you're going to get to reap the benefit from that. And like if somebody was giving you money, like what if I said, Alex, in 10 years, when you're working here, I'm going to give you $3,000 a month.
I already make more than that.
And then, no, extra, whatever. And then you're like, awesome, I'm going to work my 10 years and I'm going to get my $3,000 a month from Ayal and everything's going to be amazing. And then all of a sudden I said, well, I can't really give you 3. I'll give you 1,500. Or on the flip side, I said, it's not 10 years. Let's make it 15. you're going to be like, what the? No, you said that if I did X, I would get Y. So that's the dilemma here. And for politicians, it's a minefield, essentially, to try to attack this problem because those voter bases are very strong. The people who are nearing or collecting Social Security are generally very active.
Number one demographic.
So the politicians don't want to mess with that until basically it's going to be really late in the game and somebody's going to have to fix it.
And it's only going to get worse because people are having less and less children.
Well, I thought that was is that a bad thing? Because I was going to say, if they're having saying the population's a big issue?
Yes. So that will theoretically, 100 years from now, will be good for Social Security.
Oh.
But once again, like anything, economic forces are not one thing. That's very bad for GDP, right? Because we have less people producing stuff.
Like someone that's like in your generation is a little bit more secure.
Millennial. I'm in your generation, dude.
I'm barely
I'm an
millennial.
I'm an elder millennial.
Gen Z boys.
I'm like the last year I think of millennial, but essentially like less and less kids to pay into Social Security, and then
less and less kids, but overall it's less and less people consuming products, which is the big issue for demographics, and you can see it in Europe. Europe is about, I would say, 30 years in front of us as far as demographics. Japan's economy hasn't grown in decades because they have a very old population with, and it's going to sound funny, but a lot of savers. They don't spend their money, they don't consume, and so the economy doesn't grow. And so Japan has been in a period of like, when I was a child in the 80s, Japan was like the economic powerhouse other than the US. And they owned a ton of the stuff in LA. They were half the buildings were Japanese buildings.
What?
And their economy has not basically grown much since that point because of demographics and savings rates.
I guess I've always kind of thought of this as like the fault of baby boomers, but it's really not their fault. It's just kind of like a larger...
Yeah, it's not their fault. It's like the system was set up in a certain way.
You're always looking for someone to like blame.
Yeah.
Like, why can't, why is this an issue and why can't I buy a house and all these things? You're
it's just a math issue.
Yeah.
Like we set up a system that was not designed for a giant population to pull out money for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
The system was designed for a normal sized population to pull out money for 5 to 10 years.
We didn't think they were going to live that long.
Nobody thought we were going to live to our mid 80s. Right? So
I'm happy to have you, Grammy. I love you, Mom.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're here.
But that creates a very important financial planning aspect because when we meet with younger people, we tell them, now, in my opinion, I don't know this, but in my opinion, eventually the fix is going to be we're just going to have to raise Social Security age. So maybe that number is 70 for when you get that money, right? So, and people are living longer and people who are staying healthy. Obviously, we have an unfortunate obesity problem in this country, but people who are making it there, we can stay healthier for longer, right? So it's not different to go from 70 to 85 than it was to go from 65 to 80, right? And now there was this funny meme when the Sex and the City second movie or whatever came out, and they showed a picture of the Golden Girls from the 80s, the show Golden Girls from the 80s, and the show Sex and the City, and they said these women are the same age during their time, and you're like, there's no way that's the case. And it was true.
Botox, baby.
It's healthy living. It's exercise, becoming a normal part of people's...
That was pre-Ozempic, too, so you got to think
That was pre-Ozempic, although, yeah.
So Ozempic could actually be screwing our Social Security, because you thought obesity could help us, and maybe, okay, people aren't going to live as long because of the obesity epidemic, but now people are getting Zempicked up, could be going plus 100.
If people live longer and are productive, that's ultimately more beneficial for us, if they're productive and not a drain on the healthcare system. And that's the other thing, Medicare, right, which we talked about Social Security, but Medicare is a giant expense, and health insurance is getting more and more and more expensive all the time. The inflation rates on healthcare are almost double what they are normally.
Yeah.
And so that's a huge drain on our resources. So it's very difficult to go back to your original question.
Tariffs?
No.
Oh.
Your original question about, how much can we cut or how much can we balance, how can we balance our budget, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
it's very challenging because of these very big problems if we don't make a wholesale shift, an institutional shift on Social Security, Medicare. Can we cut defense spending by $200 billion? Probably.
Yeah.
Will that make a dent in our budget? Not really.
No.
Not really.
It's a culture thing.
It's a big systemic issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the one to fix it? We don't know. But what we do know is there's a lot going on with tariffs.
Yeah.
Mexico, Canada. I thought that we already hit them with this tariff, but it's still hypothetical.
We hit them with the idea that they're going to have a tariff.
Okay. We're just talking at this point.
And then we deferred it for 30 days, which was now 2 weeks ago. So I don't know. We have 15
How about we hit them with
left.
the idea that we might take over Mexico?
Yeah.
Give them clean water. You're welcome.
What's with Chase? Is he like, he's a very,
I don't know. I've been on good behavior. I'm
on
a stick
empire.
to it.
Like, are you like learning about the Roman Empire or something?
I don't know. I read the newspaper and all of a sudden I'm different.
All of a sudden
now.
you want to just like conquer countries?
Yeah.
Like you're playing a game of Risk?
It could be fun.
Well, Chase, I kind of hijacked your last 5 minutes there, but your timer is at 0. So if you wanted to wrap it up.
Do you have time for a couple more questions, or should we just wrap it up
like
here?
5 minutes.
All right, 5 minutes. Let's go. My final question, I guess, is let's say hypothetically these major taxes do go with Canada and Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
What could we, if things go according to book, which they rarely do, what could we kind of expect to see from that?
I mean, again, on a good case scenario, are you talking about like if things worked out well for us, or just like what will happen in reality?
I guess both. Well, I guess maybe my first question to that is like, what are the major imports that we're like buying from Canada and Mexico?
So Canada is a lot of energy and timber.
Okay,
like those are big ones. Mexico produces a lot of our stuff.
Tequila.
Tequila, I'm sure, is a big one. But we produce a lot of stuff in Mexico. We had this term, right? We were offshoring, right? We were offshoring our jobs, and then we try to get away from China and stuff like that, and we did a lot of nearshoring, as we call it.
Okay,
which is moving stuff to Mexico and Canada, which are cheaper than production in the U.S. But building our cars, for example, we build a lot of cars. Like a lot of the Ford factories are actually in Mexico.
I heard about that.
Right?
Yeah. That's recent too.
Right.
They just opened a huge one.
Right. Why? Because it's cheap labor.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know that this is going to solve anything. Politicians are short-term thinkers by nature.
Mm.
They're thinking about their next election cycle.
Yeah.
Does it help long-term? Probably not. My bigger thing about what's going to help, I think, is technological advancements. AI and robotics can ultimately, if you think about, there's the phrase, empires are built on the back of cheap labor, right? And you can, on a very grim side, you can link that to slavery, which has been a thing, throughout history until the modern era.
Yeah.
But AI and robotics are a good way for us to create cheap labor in the future.
Yeah.
Right? If we can have machines do most of our tasks, maybe that will actually help our trade deficit. Our GDP will go up because we'll have more.
Seems like it.
We'll have more production for less cost, theoretically, once we get, all the investment in.
Yeah.
But, the answer to just like creating tariffs is probably not going to help long term. The best thing that will help is innovation.
Okay. It seems weird because I think Trump it seems like he's using it as almost a punishment, and he's kind of saying like, oh, this is because of this whole fentanyl thing. But like, are there a lot of drugs coming through Canada? Like, I know that they say that there's a lot coming through the, Mexican border, but it doesn't seem like, like what is this whole punishment on Canada that he's trying to get at?
I don't know that a lot of drugs are coming through Canada. I won't pretend to know the stats or the data on that.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say trying to get, which he quoted as saying, a zero fentanyl across the border from both countries is not only unrealistic, it's just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, this is his negotiating tactic.
Yeah.
Some people come in with diplomacy and friendly talk. A lot of people in the U.S., and Trump got elected by a majority of America, so a lot of people in the U.S. believe in this, that playing the nice guys has gotten us taken advantage of over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So there's some truth to that, possibly.
Yeah.
So what's the happy middle ground? I don't know, but maybe slapping tariffs on them or coming in with a negotiating tactics of do this or else because we have leverage, because we have economic power and military power for that matter.
Yeah.
We have some negotiating leverage, and that's his tactic. His tactic is come in, guns blazing, and if you want to talk, I'll put the guns away temporarily.
So are we going to head into a tariff war?
I don't know. It really depends on how many of these actually go into effect, how aggressive we are with our trading partners, and
are they legitimate enough that we could even go to a tariff war? Because I could see, China, Russia, Japan, we could, but like, are our import-exports from Canada and Mexico that legitimate?
We import a lot.
We do?
Yeah, we do. So it does have an effect.
Okay.
China, we've actually kind of moved over the last 5 years, 6 years, we've kind of moved away from them and diversified.
And Russia,
and this is where everything, Russia we don't really do much with.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that's funny. Like, I was watching CNBC and they were showing charts of like all the countries we have big trade deficits with, which is kind of a leading question there because we moved away from China and moved to Canada, Mexico, and Vietnam. And now they're like, oh, well, look at all this money we send to Vietnam. I was like, we made an active decision to move from China to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And like, what are we going to, like, we don't produce something that Vietnam would consume. So there's always going to be that trade deficit.
Sitting here drinking Vietnamese coffee.
There you go. You're helping one coffee at a time.
And isn't Nike in Vietnam now too?
Nike's mostly in Vietnam. They used to be all in China, and they're mostly in Vietnam and Mexico. And so, like, the idea of bringing jobs back to America is a very challenging one.
Yeah.
Because there's so many factors. So I believe that these are harsh negotiating tactics, and in the end, we won't get as harsh an outcome. And by the way, the stock market is kind of telling us that right now. That's what the market believes. We don't have a huge sell-off because people are afraid of a trade war. We kind of have this up and down market, like sideways market, as we call it. Well, we're not really going up. We're not really going down. We're just kind of trading in the same range. And the market's kind of in a wait and see mode right now.
And would a tariff war, trade war, would that crash the market hypothetically?
I don't know if it would crash it, but it would probably create a downturn, mainly because it would create a lot of uncertainty and how do countries deal? We have to, things will become more expensive. How much business investment will happen now that things are more expensive. So it'll probably hurt the market always tries to guess what's coming, right?
Yeah.
And so when you add uncertainty, there's a higher likelihood that markets will fall. Doesn't mean they will, but it means the probability is higher.
Well, we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. That's all we could say for the next 3 years and 11 months.
Yeah. All right. Well, Ayal, it has been so great having you on. I hope you guys realize, it can't all be fun and games. Sometimes we got to sit down with an extremely important person and ask important questions. And, this podcast is supposed to be about you guys learning some things. So I hope you did that.
It's probably going to be the least engagement you have because it's going to be the least.
I don't know.
Thing.
People might see me in the suit and think otherwise. You never know.
That's true.
GK managing partner, founding member, and also co-host of the Future Money podcast. As Alex put it so lovingly last night, this is kind of our trading tariffs for dummies. But recently, Ayal sat down with Hitem for a more in-depth discussion on tariffs. So, some bigger thinkers, probably some better questions, and, more in-depth factual things they talked about. So, if you're interested in this and you want to keep the discussion going, definitely go check out the newest episode of the Future Money podcast.
Appreciate the cross promotion.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
so much to be excited about. Hopefully, no trade wars in the future, but
that's the hope.
We'll see.
All right, man.
Thanks.
But trouble on my mind. That's the attitude that got my ass off the sidelines. You either ride pine and cry about playing time, or you play the game divine.